Well, good morning, church family. You are my family, and it is so exciting for me to get a chance to share God's heart together with you. If you would join me in turning to the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, and if you got a pew Bible and you want to open that up, and I'd encourage you to, it's going to be page 1213 in your pew Bible, Hebrews chapter 12, or page 1213. Leading up to this chapter is a chapter that we typically call the faith chapter, Hebrews 11, which just simply kind of profiles some folks that you might call biblical rascals because they weren't perfect. Noah was kind of into construction and ministry that looked like him was building an ark, but for a couple older people, Abraham and Sarah, they got on a parenting journey that was impossible for them, but not impossible with God. Sarah laughed in God's face as he invited her onto a racetrack that I got some stuff I want to do through old folks like you. You had a guy like Enoch who was a power walker who walked with God, and one day God said, hey, let's just go to my house. And I don't know whether Enoch was a runner, but he was a power walker, and God really liked him and was so pleased with him that in chapter 11, verse 6, God said, I love people who seek earnestly after me. You go through this chapter and you get introduced to people who were not perfect, but they ran races that were marked out for them with eyes of faith raised toward their source. So with that in mind, leading into chapter 12, we are told that therefore, verse 1, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run. Let us run. Why don't you repeat that after me? Let us run. What? Again, let us run. Let us run with perseverance. The race marked out for us. Our race is going to look as unique and distinct as we are, and if we're going to run well, it goes on to say we're going to need to be making sure that we are fixing our eyes on Jesus. Why don't you repeat that? Fixing our eyes on Jesus. One more time. Fixing our eyes on Jesus. On who? Who's going to be writing the story of your life? Jesus. If you're going to run the race that's marked out for you, it's imperative that you and I, what? Fix our eyes on Jesus, who is the pioneer and the author, the perfecter of our faith. We have been involved in a ministry for 32 years, and we have been running training programs for teenagers and college students, for people of all ages and all walks of life. Adults, some of you are in the Forge Core adult training program that we provide. Some of you receive devotional content from us. But many years ago, when our first child was born, we were encouraged, don't win the world and lose your own kids. And we were very focused as parents on making sure that our kids understood this passage clearly. It was simple. To our daughter, to our son, we said, there's a race marked out for you, and it's going to look as distinct and unique as you are. You are fearfully, wonderfully handcrafted. You're a signatured, one-of-a-kind masterpiece. So your race won't look like anybody else's exactly, but it's going to be key to fix your eyes on Jesus. So I can remember our little guy, Drayson. I remember one trip when I came home, and Drayson came barreling up the stairs and came around the corner and came running into the closet where I was unpacking some things, and he tackled me with one of those big things he called an energy hug and practically knocked me over. And he said, Dad, now that you're home, everything's better. And I said, well, son, I'm so glad. And he went to walk out of the closet, and he paused for a moment, and he said, and Dad, I'm trying to love God more than I love you. And I said, well, son, good. That's the idea. That's the idea, son, because someday Dad's not going to be there, but he will be. And I want you to learn how to love him more than you love me. Because the goal in our life is to fix our eyes on Him and get to Him. I remember as a young guy, nobody had really helped me understand that. And so I'd gotten my eye on some people who were favorites, and I was kind of a relatively new Christian, and some guys started wiping out and doing stupid stuff, and I got all upset and angry about it. And I started in my head thinking, they're hypocrites, they're not real. And I almost went AWOL on my Christian faith until a TV repairman walked me over to a corner, and he pulled out a Bible, and this TV repairman said, Dwight, would you read this verse out loud for me? Fixing your eyes on Jesus. Read it again, Dwight. Fixing your eyes on Jesus. Dwight, you recognize it doesn't say fix your eyes on Tom, Jean, or Harold. It says fix your eyes on Jesus. You got to raise your gaze, son. My son kept raising his gaze to Jesus. As he kept raising his gaze, I was getting encouraged as a dad. I was seeing the unique race for him was very distinct. It was different than my race. In fact, I remember when he was all of third grade, we were pulling into the neighborhood, and he turned to me as we were pulling in, kind of one of those Memorex moments, and he said, Dad, who do you think the people are that would want to have a conversation about Jesus the most, Dad? I said, I don't know, son. He said, Dad, I know. It would be guys who were serving in the military on the front lines, who are in harm's way, Dad. They'd be the ones most ready for a conversation about Jesus. I should have been taking notice of the fact that his favorite apparel in those days was beginning to be camouflage. And in fact, most of his closet, because his mother was okay with it, was camo. And he'd formed a little neighborhood squad that was the watchdogs of the neighborhood. And we had a PAR officer come once to meet with concerned neighbors. And they said, listen, your little guys have kind of got it sewed up. They're hiding behind bushes. They're checking everything out. They report back to you. You ought to be paying them some sort of service fee. They're doing a great job. I remember a more important moment. Our son was in high school, and I went to walk out of his bedroom one night, and he said, Dad, you need to know, I got my own relationship with God now. I really do, Dad, and it's strong. I said, son, that's great, because the race you're going to run, you're going to need Him. All of us, the race we're on, we need Him. So encouraged me. So you remember that all the way through life, he was starting to get little markings on what his race might look. So imagine for my wife and I, when we got on an airplane this past week, and we flew to California, and we joined thousands of family members and parents in the grandstands, and a parade deck was in front of us on Friday. And as we watched young military, just trained through 3 months of boot camp, parade in front of us, my eye was moving, fixated on the 6'2" young man that I knew, that's mine. And as they began to move forward, and finally they said, break, these are your U.S. Marines. There was my boy among the lineup. And as my wife and I greeted our son afterward, he said, Dad, Jesus has been with me through 3 months of the toughest days of my life. And then he said, Dad, I want to introduce you to some of my guys. God gave me the opportunity to be a squad leader, Dad, and my rack mate came to Jesus. I can't wait for you to meet him. My son is on his race, and he's fixing his eyes on Jesus. That's what He wants for all of us. It was in the 1940s and 50s, a cartoon character named Lil Abner had introduced to us a rather homely gal named Sadie Hawkins, who we began in our country to declare that there was a Sadie Hawkins Day, which meant the gals would be in charge on that day. They would be the pursuers and men would be the pursuees. That they would decide how things ran, and they would be the ones who would be in charge. And particularly on Sadie Hawkins Days, which happened annually in the 1950s, late 40s, early 50s, there would be Sadie Hawkins races and Sadie Hawkins dances, and the gals got to decide who was going to go with who because they were in charge. Well, there was a good-looking, strapping athlete who was leaning up against his locker in 1951 at a Midwest college who started talking with his friends about this Sadie Hawkins race that was going to be coming. And they began speculating who some of the gals were on campus and who some of the chasers might be and how ready they needed to be for this epic moment. Well, they got in line. And that guy that you just saw leaning against the locker had a conversation with the most outstanding, handsome, athletic guy on the campus, Don Simpkins. My father, who was the guy leaning against the locker, said Don Simpkins was worried because the rumor had it that the homeliest girl on campus had his number, and she was after him. Well, sure enough, as the guys' line formed up, the gals' line formed behind, and Don Simpkins had positioned himself over here, but she just moved in the girls' line right behind him. She got directly behind him, and as he turned around, she said, Don Simpkins, I'm coming after you. And as he saw her determination, and he recognized he was locked in her crosshairs, she was locked and loaded on him, and then he looked down and saw she had a brand new pair of running shoes on. My dad said, I saw just a little drop of perspiration form on his brow. And then he said, Don Simpkins, who was not only just a great athlete, a great runner, but he was also a great climber. He saw a tree in the distance, and he thought, if I could just get to that tree, I'm home safe. And so sure enough, the gun sounded and the race was on, and Don Simpkins began to run with all his might. He ran toward that tree. He skimmied up the tree like a bear being hunted by a hound dog, and all the way up to the top limb he made his way, till finally he was up there where he felt safe. But that gal who had arrived at the tree looked up, and she thought about it, and she sat down. Don Simpkins, you're going to have to come down sometime. And I'll be awaiting right here. My dad said there were people who wished they had lawn chairs and popcorn bowls because it played out for a while. Finally, at one point, she looked up the tree and said, Don Simpkins, I'm waiting for you. I'll wait all day if I have to because you're worth it. My dad said that the crowd did the same thing you just did. Oh. She was willing to wait for the one she'd fixed her eyes on. Same day, same lineup. There was a guy over here who noticed the gal he'd been watching for a while. She was the one he was most attracted to, and he was so hopeful. He hadn't met her yet, but he was hopeful that he could position himself in front of her. But as he kept watching her and he got in line, it looked like she wasn't getting in the girls' line. And he couldn't understand what was going on. And finally, nervous because he didn't want caught by he wanted caught by her. He went, psst, psst, you gonna run? She said, no. Psst, why not? I have a heart problem? Well, she didn't have a heart problem, but she was going to have a heart problem because he so wanted her that he went, psst, psst. If you run, I'll let you catch me. I asked my mother, who got in line, how long did it take you to catch him? She said, your father only took 2 steps, and he was mine. 2 years later, they were married. And this past summer, they celebrated 65 years of wedded bliss. They are members here at Colorado Community. And I asked my dad, so Dad, when exactly did you get engaged? What did that look like? He said, well, son, that was not a word. The word engage didn't exist in the English language. I said, well, what'd you call it? He said, we called it getting hitched, or we were getting married. Well, I looked it up. Where did that word come into existence? In the English language, it came into existence in 1946. It was a French word that they were using in France to describe the people who were engaged as writers or as artists or as intellectuals who were standing against in World War II. They were standing against what was wrong, and they were engaged in what was right. They were in an epic battle with everything that they had, the race marked out for them. They were engaged. And those who were speaking English language went, those are difference makers. They were part of the resistance. They were engaged ones. And we began to say, wait, that word that describes a passionate heart and fiery commitment, passionate hearts and fiery committed people are the ones who've been world changers down through time. We're going to adopt that word. So that's when it began to be a word describing what two individuals were going to do. We were going to, with passionate hearts and fiery commitment, engage. But that's the same word we use when an engine is going to engage and commit, or in military battle when we're going to engage the enemy with a passionate heart and a fiery commitment. Or when you decide you want to engage a financial accountant or an attorney or a carpenter, you'll say, I'm going to engage this person to do such and such for me. To engage is to make a passionate-hearted, fiery commitment. And I would tell you this morning, that the one whose eye is on you, because you're the apple of his eye. Man, he loves you with undying, unquenchable love. He's saying to you, have you heard him? Psst, psst, you're going to run. He's saying to you, psst, if you'll run, I'll let you catch me. He wants to be caught. A simple couple steps and you could be engaged to Jesus. And what might that look like? For me, I grew up with a nickname. I've told you before as a congregation, my loving aunt, I was the kind of kid every parent hopes and prays they'll never get. And my aunt nicknamed me Dwight the Fright. And it was the epitome of who I was. And I remember rejection and people turning away. In fact, a week ago when Pastor Robert preached, and we had brought a guest couple to us to church, and we told them we'd take them to dinner afterward on a Saturday night service. And we were looking forward to a romantic couple-to-couple dinner. When we got to the restaurant, they said, would it be okay if we kind of shifted things around a little bit? And he said, she wants to meet with your wife on the other side of the restaurant, and I want to sit with you on this side of the restaurant. That wasn't the romantic dinner that I was looking forward to, but there we sat on opposite sides of the restaurant, and then we began to understand as they started unpacking a lot of truth and a lot of hard stuff. And finally, at one point, I could see how nervous he was. And I said, brother, listen, it's okay. There's nothing you're going to reveal or say that's going to cause me to withdraw or retreat from you. You're safe. And he paused for a moment. It was like it hit him like a ton of bricks. And he teared up and said, no one's ever said that to me before. That means a lot. I said, no. Someone said that to you before. It's the same one that says, if you'll run, I'll let you catch me. He said, I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. I'll never abandon you. And I want to tell you, Dwight the Fright turned to him. I remember when I did it, I'd read this verse called, if you want to enter the kingdom, you should come like a child. I didn't know what I was doing, but I got in a closet and I pulled the drawstring light off because I felt kind of stupid about it, but I just raised my hands like a child would to a dad that needed his help. And I said, here I am. And he did what James 4:8 says, come near to God and he'll come near to you. It was my engagement moment. I was coming near and he was coming near. And suddenly everything began for me. This epic relationship with one who would never retreat, turn away, or pull back from Dwight the Fright. This was the one that when I was singing the song on the way to church today. You never give up, you never give up, you never give up on me. You know, hallelujah, he never gave up. That was over 50 years ago. And I have put him through a lot of stuff. Some of you are going, man, if I tried to get engaged to Jesus, Dwight, I've tried it before. I just fail. I fall miserably. Well, welcome to that club. Do you think that Jesus, who told his disciples to be a part of a 70 times 7 forgiveness club, wasn't going to be leader of the pack and didn't have the capacity to forgive you more times than you could hardly forgive yourself? Yeah, but I get so down on myself. Well, you know what? Maybe you got to get your eyes off yourself and get your eyes on your Savior. Get your eyes off of this and get your eyes on Him. He's your hope. If you're going to run your race, you fix your eyes on who? Jesus. And I had a brother say to me, but I'm falling all the time. And I said, listen, failure is not when you blow it. Failure is when you quit. Keep getting back up again and get your eyes on Jesus. He said, yeah, but I'm falling all the time. I said, just make sure you're getting up again. Outnumbers your falls. That's the key. Get back up again and fix your eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of your faith. I fight every day. I fight to stay engaged. I was so moved a couple weeks ago when they replayed the interview Diane Sawyer did with Billy Graham during the last decade of his life. And she asked him if there were any regrets. He said, oh, yes, I have a regret. And he repeated his regret twice. He said, I wish I'd have told the Lord more how much I love Him. I do. I wish I'd have told the Lord more how much I love Him. That was the cool deal for me, that Billy was giving the world his greatest gift all the way to the end, his intimacy with God. You and I, pursuing God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, that's the greatest gift you'll give. There were people who've given that gift to you. Pastor Robert gives that gift to us ongoing. The greatest gift he's given us is his intimacy with God. We don't just get Pastor Robert, we get Jesus. And that's the greatest gift. Some of you had a grandparent who gave to you. That's the greatest gift we give each other. That's the greatest gift we give a world that's waiting in need as we run our race, as we fix our eyes on Jesus, our intimacy, our engagement with Him. And some of us need to renew that engagement. My father, I've noticed that there was year 65. He was here for an earlier service today. He still writes love notes to my mama. He still is all the time loving on her because he said, Dwight, all the way to the finish line, all the way to the finish line. And it's the same way with the top priority relationship in our life that means the most to us, more than any. Dwight, what would engagement look like? Well, it might look like you going on a date with the one that you love the most. Pastor Doug talked with us a couple weeks ago about going on a date with God, and he referenced a little booklet called Is God Waiting for a Date with You? We didn't happen to have the book in the building that night, but we have them here today. Is God waiting for a date with you? Just a little booklet. Some of you, it would change everything for you to begin to be on dates with this one who's going to arm you with strength. I love you, O Lord, my strength, David the psalmist wrote. And being on dates with Him. Some of you ought to pull on a hoodie or a jacket this afternoon and go on a walk with Him. Do you know that the old timers used to sing a song, and He walks with me and He talks with me and He tells me I'm His own? And some of us ought to go on a walk and talk with Him. Pull the hoodie up if it's cold and put your hands in the pocket and just thank Him for the comfort of His love. Some of you ought to have a coffee. You have coffee with all your friends. Maybe you ought to have a coffee with Him and pull out a little journal and write Him a love note from your heart. Some of us have loved Him for too long with our heads. We just know about Him, and we have life routines that are about Him, but our hearts still are kind of safeguarded. We're back here like maybe He couldn't handle my truth. Maybe He couldn't handle all of this. Maybe it'd just be too much for me to say I love you, when in fact that could be the transformational piece. I remember watching Nancy Reagan leaning over the casket of the one who had loved her so intimately and so passionately. Her life had been changed by that love. Ronnie had written so many letters to her over time, so many that they've compiled them in a book, but one of them that's so unique, because some of you are thinking, I wouldn't know what to write if I pulled out a journal over a cup of coffee or a beverage. What would I write? Well, maybe you'd write something just as simple. Let the heart move your pen. Something as simple as Ronnie wrote to Nancy on White House stationery. He pulled out a piece of stationery and he just said, I love you. He wrote again, I love you. And then he wrote it again, I love you, 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 I love you. And besides that, I love you. Maybe you ought to write a love note like that to the one. You're saying, Dwight, you're being so ridiculous. Listen, He's not an idea to engage. He is a living relationship who wants you to run with a passionate heart, remember? And fiery commitment that your heart will be engaged with Him. That's when your greatest gift will be given to this world, when your heart's on the race. So engage Jesus. I wrote a book called Forged by Fire, Making Intimacy with God Your Greatest Gift. This is the first live event it's ever been at this morning. Just came out. I just so wanted people to know how possible it is for us to be God lovers and Christ gazers and people who will really let the world taste Jesus through the appetizer of our Dwight the Fright lives, where they go, man, this is not you that I'm getting. Nope, it's not. It's him. It's sort of like when I wrote the book, Your God's Plan A, and there's no plan B. I put James the roofer in the front. Why'd you put a roofer in the front? Because when James stood in my doorway and I tried to compliment him, he said, sir, I can't accept the compliment. I said, sure you can. You did a great job. He said, no, sir, unless you'd let me tell you just a piece of my story that I didn't know James the roofer. He was new to me. He said, well, let me tell you my story. And he went on to tell me about how Jesus had rescued him. And then he got to the end of the story, this rugged roofer in my door I wrote about in Plan A. And he said, so, sir, I appreciate the compliment, but you need to know I am who I am because of him. James the roofer had fixed his eyes on Jesus for so many years that he was bringing a deliverable to every roofing job he had, including the stranger he had just served. How many of us in this room would commit to engage Jesus? I would love to tell you how engaging his love book for us has changed me. I would love to tell you what I told a member of the U.S. swim team who turned to me on a flight, and he was across the aisle from me, and he said, what is that you're reading? It was an early morning flight, and I'd pulled my Bible out. I'd left my hotel so early that morning I hadn't had time, and at that time I had a big thick Bible with the dividers for where the books of the Bible were. And I said, it's my Bible. And he said, oh, I saw all those little dividers. I thought you were reading a dictionary. I'd never seen anybody read a dictionary before. I said, no, it's my Bible. He said, so I've never seen anybody do that. Why are you reading the Bible? Are you taking a class or something? I said, no, actually it's been changing me because the one who wrote it is talking to me through this and helping me through this. I'm looking so forward this week to sharing with people who want to get engaged to Jesus all the things that he was beginning to reveal that were life-changing truths. See, when Pastor Robert asked me this past month, would you read the Discipled by Jesus book that I've written that's going to come out this summer and do an endorsement? I said, absolutely, let me have it. The electronic version came over. I was so excited to read through this book, and I went, oh, Robert, this is my life journey. Because when I read Luke 24:45 that said he opened their minds so they could understand the scriptures, I realized those were just regular people like me. They weren't special dudes. They weren't seminary people. They were regular people. And Robert, just what you described in this Discipled by Jesus book, fixing my eyes on him and reading his words to me, he has changed me. Robert had been teaching these concepts for the last 3 or 4 years at Deep Camp, a camp in the mountains for families that their family and our family and other families from across the nation and around the world come to just spend 5 days going deep so our influence can go wide. And I said, Robert, I've been listening to these messages for a while, and it is the story of your life. It's the story of my life. It's what we want to tell others. It's not about us. It's about him. And when we run the race marked out for each of you, it's going to look different. But we run with our eyes fixed on Jesus, the author of our story. Watch the impact that's going to take place when you give this world, not you, but the greatest gift you'll ever give, your intimacy with God. This morning when I awoke, I had some little alarms and alerts on Facebook, and one of them was just a comment to my son from a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army from an active military station overseas. He had known my son when my son was in high school, and he remembered a comment that I had made to him many years ago as he was ramping up his own engagement with Christ and turning up the volume of his desire to be engaged to Jesus and his word. So he wrote to my son this morning a simple line that he and I had talked about. He said, Drayson, remember not only who you are, remember whose you are. That is the most defining thing you will ever determine in your life. And I want to tell you this morning, I'm throwing an engagement party. You want to get engaged? Do you want to renew your engagement? Would you like to ramp it up? I would love for us as a body of people, but for you as an individual to know you are unconditionally loved. Come on, I'm Dwight the Fright. I can tell you that for 50 years he's been putting up with me. He can definitely deal with you and your stuff. And make your best deliverable. Not only you running a race that's about who you are, but fixing your eyes on Jesus and running a race that demonstrates whose you are. So this engagement party this morning invites you to take steps with me. And I decided, well, Dwight, what's your skin in the game going to be as a fellow church member? And I decided for the next 4 weeks, I'm just going to turn up my engagement with Jesus and His Word. And for those who want to do the same thing, there's a number that you can dial into your text. And if you put that number into your text bar, just put the number in and you put the word engage. I want to begin on a weekly basis for 4 weeks to go on a journey with you. I'll send you little videos of the things He's taught and been teaching me in my own life so we can just continue to move closer, because what He doesn't want is for you to be impressed with Him from a distance. He wants you to be impacted by Him up close. You impress from a distance, but you impact up close. And He wants that up-close engagement with you. If you put that number in, by the way, since it's an engagement party, I think I ought to bring a present to the party. So your engagement party, I decided I'm going to bring 50 free books. So anybody who keys in the number and puts the word engage, I'm going to give out 50 free books just to come alongside you and your passionate commitment. I didn't want to just come alongside my son and my daughter and others, but my own church family. So any of you who key in the number and put the word engaged, we're going to do 50 free books out. Some of you are going, I probably wouldn't get the free one. Well, you know what? There's books in the lobby, and I decided it's an engagement party. Everything in the lobbies are half price. Every single book out there, from the book Doug Carlson mentioned 2 weeks ago to the Plan A book to the Forged by Fire. Come on, it's an engagement party, everything half price. Not for you to buy something, but for you to fuel your engaged heart to Jesus and His Word. Why? Because you and I want to pray a closing prayer together. And we want to pray it from our hearts. And it goes like this. Let's bow our heads together. Oh God, You've shown us in Your Word. You've called us in Your Word with a cloud of great witnesses around us. You've called us to run. We said the phrase earlier, and now we're going to repeat it again. Let us run. Church, can you say it? Let us run. Again, let us run. Again, let us run. Now let's make it a personal prayer. God, let me run. Would you say, God, let me run? God, let me run. Help us run. Now, fixing our eyes on Jesus, not on any other target, not on man. We'll disappoint each other, not on anything, not on anyone, but Jesus, the author and perfecter of our story. We want to fix our eyes on Jesus. Say it, church, fix our eyes on Jesus. Now, Lord, we want to make it personal. I want to fix my eyes on Jesus. Let's pray it, church. I want to fix my eyes on Jesus. I want to fix my eyes on Jesus. And with passionate heart and fiery commitment, I want to engage the forge fire of Your love, O God, for me, and be in the fire of Your love transformed, changed, engaged by Your truth and Your love. In Jesus' name, amen.